So we are looking at a project today that has delivered heat decarbonisation plans at scale as part of the Liverpool City Region Combined Authority programme to look at their buildings and their built estate. Heat decarbonisation plans are essential if you're looking at SALIC's public sector decarbonisation scheme, and just to draw your attention to, it's part of a process that logically takes you towards looking at how to improve buildings and produce a project plan and investment case for that. And this webinar is talking about the experience that the Liverpool City Region had, supported by the North West Net Zero Hub. And we're I've lost my screen there. And we're going to talk about that. But the hub provide guidance and support for those that are going into public sector decarbonisation or PSDS funding. And we've got lots of resources on our website. I would encourage you to go there if you're looking for information. Also, if you've got a .gov email address, you can join Net Zero Go and see much of the catapult resources and the fantastic resources that are on Net Zero Go. So take advantage of the tools and best practice guides that are there. So as I said, the project's about delivering decarbonisation plans for Liverpool City Region. And it was a major programme that was undertaken. And today we're inviting Nick Heard, who was the manager for the whole project, to come and give us his experience and support that practical help that we're trying to give. Now I'm going to stop sharing here and hand over to you, Nick, and you can take it on at your leisure. How are you getting organised, Nick? Do you want people to ask questions as you go along?
Sorry, I was on mute, wasn't I? Right. Is that visible and full screen for people?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Right. Thank you, Eddie, and thanks to you and Luca for inviting me along to speak today. Hopefully, we can impart a few wise words and share a bit of the experience that we went through late last year, earlier this year, collectively to deliver what was a very wide-ranging programme. So, sort of agenda I've got here. I won't try and kill you with PowerPoint too much here, but so we've got a very quick introduction, quick overview, peer group, and then move on to very swiftly onto the brief, the LCRCA brief and the timeline for delivery, what the organisation, the organogram looked like, how we were set up to deliver, delivery methodology, quick few words around decarbonisation hierarchy, and then share some of the sort of project outputs, some of the sample content from the reports that we provided, and then finish really with a discussion just around some of the challenges that we encountered during the delivery, and then hopefully there's some room at the end for questions. Okay, so just very, I won't play this part because it's not really what you're here for, but just very quickly, care design and business services, that's who I work for, that's who where my team sit. We're a multidiscipline consultancy, an autonomous multi-D consultancy within the wider care group. And when I say autonomous, what I mean is we're a separate business in effect. We're substantially externally facing, although we do work for the sister companies within care. So we've got an established track record in low carbon consultancy, doing feasibilities, doing full design through to BISRIA 4A level, and including even client-side contract management of site delivery works. And we've done that quite extensively for some of our clients. We typically self-deliver these assignments, but where appropriate, and certainly on the LCRCA project, we did engage with supply chain partners to respond to the scale and the timeline of delivery required. And sort of key clients for us over the last 12 months, apart from LCRCA, Liverpool City Council, Mersey Travel, Oldham Borough Council, Lincoln County Council, we have an office over there. We do a lot of work for London Mayor's Office, so Metropolitan Police in effect. A lot of low carbon work for them. Hackney Borough Council, and then, as I say, we do some internal work for care construction, care places and highways. And then just in the wider group, care places, they're more about providing maintenance solutions. They deliver low carbon implementation works, the sort of scale of projects which could flow out of the studies we've been doing. And then care construction are the bigger brother, if you like. They're the largest regionally based builder in the UK. Okay, and there's a nice pretty graphic writ there really showing just care group's approach to decarbonisation and all the various steps along that path. We can deliver all of them or elements within there. So depending on different delivery models that people want to adopt. I won't go through that in too much detail. If people get to the delivery stage, or even actually if they're doing early stage explorations, they can engage with our construction group through various procurement routes, through Crown Commercial Services Framework, SCAPE framework, for projects from 50,000 upwards. And one example of that is we're talking with, or care construction, discussing with, say, Scottish Fire and Rescue about their low carbon objectives across their estate, and that's from feasibilities onwards. And there's a number of other procurement routes there, which lend themselves to different sectors. Right, that's kind of the sales bit done, which I'm always obliged to include in these things. But so the LCRCA brief and timeline. We were requested or appointed to provide heat decarbonisation plans for 51 buildings spread across 5 partner authorities. The building types, there was a broad mix there, big chunk of library buildings, transport facilities such as bus stations and ticket offices, etc. Large civic buildings like St George's Hall, Liverpool Town Hall, Wallasey Town Hall. Leisure centres, there was, I think it was 8 of those, 6 of those with pools. Obviously large carbon footprints with those. Quite a number of office facilities, and then there's a kind of a residual amount of others, children's homes, old people's homes, various other items that don't lend themselves to being grouped together. Overall timeline, I think I'm right in saying that LCRCA pursued the LCSF phase 3 funding around about June 2022. Were successfully awarded that. They moved into a procurement exercise from August, or I think it was very, very late July, that resulted in our appointment in September. And our programme delivery was then through to end of March. There was a small overspill into early April with tidying up some documentation, but substantially to meet SAILIC's LCSF deadlines, we needed to deliver reports by the end of March 2023. LCSF phase 3, they awarded 14.5 million across 149 organisations. So this was, and this I think I'm right in saying was probably one of the largest programmes that they awarded monies to. Phase 4, they launched in March 2024 and was very quickly oversubscribed, and they were looking to award about 17 million, and that's kind of been and gone now. So the organogram that we were working with, as I say, there was 5 partner authorities: the Liverpool City Council, St Helens, Mersey Travel, Knowsley Council and Wirral. They were effectively the clients for Eddie and Luca as LCRCA combined authority running this particular piece of work. Our project delivery team, as I say, because of the sort of the scale, the short timelines, both to mobilise and to deliver the work and so on, we did reach out to partner organisations who we've worked with previously, and in particular on this, we engaged with Clean Onshore, who have a sort of a track record within this area and a good knowledge of the SAILIC's processes, and they brought in some supply chain as well around the surveys and audits through Silver EMS. We provided the overall sort of direction, and our team based out of the Speak office in Liverpool provided all the design element to the reports. Okay. Delivery methodology, a fairly standard sort of approach here, really. Mobilisation, data gathering, which was very much the initial sucking in the information from the partner organisations, the builders, building owners. There was a hub established for sharing that information so that everybody could access that. Following on from that, and there was a lot of sort of paralleling of activity here because of the size and spread of this commission. But we had teams going out doing the building surveys, looking at the building fabric, looking at the M&E plant installed within and the systems, and feeding that back to the design teams. There's following from that, using the available data and the building survey information, there was some sort of data analysis, some optioneering, looking at the options and the possibilities for those buildings, and then flowing that into a feasibility design stage. And it is just kind of the feasibility end. So if it was if the building lent itself to replacement of boiler plant with air source heat pumps, we would look at that, do some outline design of what the existing system looks like, what the new system would look like, some preliminary sizing and selection of appropriate plant, doing the energy calculations that underpin all that, which would be informed by sort of what you might term a simple level thermal model of the building. So working that through to generate a feasibility design, that would apply equally to LED. Was LED lighting an appropriate solution? Was the space in the grounds or on the roof or wherever for PV? So looking at all those different options. That feeds into the report writing stage, and then following on with client review. And we had sessions in the Mersey Travel offices in Liverpool with each of the 5 head clients to review the overall reports and our proposals across the buildings. And we took on board quite a lot of feedback within those sessions. Did some further, report revisions, and then rolled that through into the overall program level analysis. Fairly hectic period, as you can imagine, juggling the sheer number of buildings that we were looking at. Within our overall approach, we took a fairly standard approach, I suppose, really to decarbonisation hierarchy, and recognising that the likely objective here was that the client organisations may want to go on and pursue PSDS funding for some of the projects that flowed out of this. So fairly standard hierarchy there, with prioritise energy use reduction, and then next energy efficiency. So very much looking at the building fabric, looking at the services, equipment, optimizing those, transitioning to low carbon heat. So very much moving away from fossil fuel to electricity. And as a final step to that is consideration of renewables where possible on site, to offset some of the electrification of the heat. Salix PSDS grant funding in the current round is very much focused on reducing direct emissions, scope 1 emissions, and with a particular emphasis on those buildings deemed to have end-of-life gas-fired plants. Now, historically, Salix have tended to classify end-of-life as assessed in accordance with CIBSE Guide M guidelines, and or as assessed by a professional. Now, CIBSE Guide M would typically, the boiler plant, for example, might be 15 to 20 years. In the most current guidance for the current round of funding, Salix have gone further than that to reference 10 years as a guide figure for end of life. So that's quite a bit shorter. We sort of took cognizance of that and fed that into the assessment of the various buildings. Funding, Salix funding currently limited to £325 per tonne of CO2 lifetime saved of scope 1, and where that value can be bettered, that does open up opportunity to incorporate electricity saving measures such as PV, LED lighting, which reduce the scope 2 or indirect emissions. And where projects exceed that threshold, then they become subject to a client match funding contribution. So those were just some of the considerations we were trying to take into account at the data analysis stage. So project outputs, we decided fairly early on the way to do this was with individual HDP reports or feasibility type reports for each of the buildings, 51 of those. Those were then grouped and captured within 5 overarching reports, 1 for each member authority. And then there was finally 1 summary overarching report for the entire programme. As you move up the tree there, you move more from the building review and the design assessment and design proposals and costings, and they flow upwards through the other reports to produce various data sets which are intended to allow the authorities to really see the wood for the trees, understand where the low-hanging fruit is in their estates and which projects they should be prioritising. We're delighted Salix have included 2 of our reports on their website as example HDP studies. There's a link there taking you to those. So one of them is the Mersey Travel Chapter 4, which is effectively the level 2 overarching report for Mersey travel, and the other one is Chapter 4.13, which was the building level report for the Pierhead ticket office, which if I just jump back up, is this sort of fairly iconic looking building down on the waterfront. Okay. Cool. To complement those overarching reports, LCRCA were also provided with some fairly comprehensive graphical data sets, which were generated from the 1.5 hub tool, which is part of Clean Onshore's sort of standard armory. And we'll see a few of the outputs from that later on, but I won't sort of pretend to be the expert presenter for that particular tool. It's so just some sample content within the building level reports. As I say, very much an optioneering process to go through, looking at on this chart on the left hand side, looking at the various using the hierarchy on the left and looking at the various options that may be available, yes or no, and some justification why. There was a great deal of calculation and analysis went on behind all that, and where options were deemed feasible, we would provide the sort of proposed heating schematics. These are all outputs that are required ultimately by Salix in a grant application, and again looking at the existing and the proposed electrical supply arrangements to support those facilities. Jumping up to the authority level report, and you can see within here some of the data that will have flowed from the building level up into the authority level. So at the top there, you've got a range of different buildings, looking at the baseline, gas, electric consumption, CO2 emissions, what's with the decarbonisation proposals, what impacts that's going to make, what kind of savings, and whether or not they fall within that end of life heating plant that is a bit of a ticket through to PSDS qualification. This chart on the right hand side, I appreciate that there's a lot on the screen at the moment, but there's a way of condensing the number of slides really. But on the right hand side, there's a portfolio heat map of the various projects, and you can see any of these that are highlighted in yellow have the end of life boilers. What we're looking at here is on the vertical scale is the cost per ton of CO2 saved, and on the horizontal axis the total lifetime CO2 saving. So the most attractive, most viable projects would be the ones down in the bottom right corner, and the least attractive, least viable would be in the top left. Very good, effective way of just getting a snapshot. What that doesn't necessarily do, you could home in on something down in the bottom right that maybe looks extremely attractive, but in portfolio terms doesn't have a huge impact because it's not a massive consumer in the first place because of the size of the building. Again, another tool here which drops out of the 1.5 hub is the portfolio energy use visualization. Very good way of just seeing again where your big hitters are within the estate on a total energy basis, total gas, total electricity. There's, as I say, there are multiple ways of graphically presenting the various data. And then down at the bottom, just a little sample there of the heat pump and heating system selections that have flown out of our design team efforts. So for Birkenhead bus station, selected a Mitsubishi Ecodan type XYZ with a heat output 11 kilowatts, seasonal coefficient of performance of 3.34. And we've done some preliminary sizing on thermal storage as well. And all that feeds in and helps to inform the capital cost estimates. And then at the whole program level report, which I say looks at all 51 buildings across the estate. Again, just some samples out of there of the different types of information presentation. There's the waterfall type approach, which we've seen before. Summaries of scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 savings. Total energy by building name, so right the way across all 51. As I say, a lot of this data here drops out at the 1.5 hub or the master spreadsheet that we've used to collate the information. Okay, so principal challenges that we encountered. The most obvious one really is just a tight delivery program relative to program scale. Trying to deliver across 51 sites within effectively a 6-month window. Very challenging that. And obviously that's coupled to a short mobilization period as well. So yeah, that is by far the biggest challenge, I think. Building data and energy usage data coming back from the building operators or partner authorities, that was very variable. Some were extremely good, extremely on it, provided fairly comprehensive data sets up front without with very little chasing. And by building data, what we're looking for there typically would be things like floor plans, ideally in CAD format. Any building elevations would be great. Anything that helps to inform us producing a simplified thermal model for the building. Any information around the any refurb that's been done on that estate previously, building fabric, M&E systems, any of that is all very useful. Energy usage data, typically what we're ideally wanting there is a kind of a half-hourly data drop for the last couple of years. Few challenges around that in this particular case because that overlapped back into the COVID period, so there was a bit of interpretation required around that, and really just an understanding of the building usage. Survey limitations and emissions. What I'm referring to there is clearly we deploy surveyors out to the sites. That has to be arranged up front, obviously, with the building users to varying degrees. I mean, we had a great deal of cooperation in doing that. That was excellent. Inevitably, with some buildings, access into certain areas isn't always readily available. So we encountered a few issues around that. From our own side, the initial survey information that was collected, we recognised as we worked through it, there were a few gaps in emissions in there, and there were a number of buildings that were subject to a second visit a bit later in the programme. And because we were working across so many sites, it was challenging just keeping the connection between the survey and the design development, in timeline terms. Which, if you were doing, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 type of buildings, 5 buildings, say, it's much easier to tie that all together into a much neater package. So we worked around that. I think we overcame it in the end, but it was a challenge on this size of commission. Limited interaction with building owners, operators. That was a function of again, I think scale of program and just the overall sort of organogram and management structure there. Yeah, I think when we had that detailed interaction, in retrospect, it was a little bit late in the program. We could have all benefited from doing that a little bit earlier. But lesson learned from that, I think. The data management, inevitably across that many sites, that many reports, that throws its own challenges. There were some good IT solutions implemented there. Like I say, we had the 1.5 hub, we had the SharePoint site, but inevitably when you're pushing that amount of data around, it does throw a few challenges to keeping it tightly controlled, and it throws challenges to the client organizations as well in terms of being able to review that in a timely fashion. And then the last item on here is engagement with the utility company. In this case, Scottish Power Manweb. We had some early engagement with them, facilitated through Luca. All the signs were very positive. They promised a great deal. They delivered very little, in truth. I don't think that's particularly unusual, unfortunately. And I noticed Salix are currently promoting some webinars, understanding how to navigate the DNO, the distributed network operator. So as I say, it's a very common problem. The reality is these organisations are flooded with applicants wanting, all pursuing the same type of information. Very challenging for them to, I think, to try and respond to that in an effective way. But as a result of that, we had to draw on a great deal of internal experience to best guess, best estimate on a site-by-site basis what we thought could be the likely impact on the network. Where did we think substation upgrades would almost certainly be required? Where do we think the incoming suppliers would be able to cope, and try and allocate some budget costings to that? But yeah, I can only suggest, as early as possible, get that engagement in place and just keep banging on the door. Okay, and that's it for me, really. I'm quite happy to move on to questions, or hand back over to Eddie and Luca if they want to sort of take that part of the session, and we'll respond as best we can to any questions on the day, and or if we need to take anything away offline and back to it, we're happy to do that as well.
Thanks, Nick. That was fantastic. The hub supported the city region in trying to get this programme moved on, but there were an awful lot of challenges along the way. The time scale was something you mentioned quite early, but I'm not sure that's untypical of the programmes that Salix are helping to fund. Is there any way you think that things could be improved from your experience?
As you say, I think the timeline, I mean, it's a common theme across most government grant funded schemes, that they always tend to have very tight timelines, on whether that's this one, or even I think some of the delivery funding quite often is tied into extremely tight timelines as well, sort of a 12-month delivery program, that sort of thing, which I don't think is particularly helpful, and I don't think is the way of achieving best value spend for the public purse, but it is what it is. My suggestion really here, I mean, 6 months is not an unrealistic expectation on a smaller program. I think it was, here it was the fact it was coupled to such a large program. I think that Salix have responded to one thing helpfully in that they brought forward the LCF funding applications to April, this on the most recent round. Having said that, I think the outcomes were still in July. because in an ideal world, they would get those outcomes out earlier, allow procurement of consultants to go ahead earlier, and quite simply either have a longer lead in from appointment to hitting the ground and starting to deliver, or quite simply just getting the program started earlier and being able to spread it over a longer period. But as I say, if it's a smaller program that people are being tasked with, then it changes the metrics of it, changes the dynamics of it. Sure, and the only other approach, and I don't think it's one that people would want to pursue, would be for public authorities, for you to look at trying to go through the consultant selection process almost ahead of having confirmed that you've got the money in your pocket from LCSF. That's another way of doing it. So you compress or reduce the time lag between grant funding and kicking off the scheme. But that could almost be a bit controversial in that people may be bidding for something that doesn't come to pass. But yeah.
Thank you. I'll invite anyone to ask a question. You've got the whole team there with you, so the cross reference to all the parts of the project are available for people to ask questions on. I suppose while we're waiting, my other question would be: do you think aggregated programs are worth pursuing? And is there another way that would be better to deliver this? As in, should it be in conjunction with an end provider on a longer scale relationship rather than jumping in and out the way we do?
Is that a question to myself, Eddie?
Well, to the group,
or is that an open one across everybody? I think clearly, if you have a longer term arrangement with a partner, you can better position the resources to respond within a timeline. If with any business, and with a consultancy like ourselves, at the end of the day, it's about resource management. And at any point in time, the reality of a consultancy is that you have a current workload, you have a pipeline of work, and some of that will come to pass and some of it won't. So you are constantly sort of juggling that against the resources that you have available. As I say, with this one, we recognised at bid stage that we weren't in a position to self-deliver it entirely, and so that is an approach that we more typically take on schemes. But for this, we recognise that wasn't really practicable, and hence the relationship with Clean Onshore and some of their supply chain. But yes, if you can establish that longer term relationship, and as I alluded to there, for ourselves within Care Group, there are different approaches. You can look to partner with an organisation such as Care, where you can get the full cradle to grave solution from feasibility all the way through to delivery for those projects that you want to deliver, and that's that's fantastic. I think from our perspective, if we can have those kind of relationships, but we can dip in and out and do parts of them. So there's sort of advantages and not to others. I think with the longer term relationship, there's also a definite opportunity there to really align the objectives of the two organisations and get that deeper understanding. I mean, for this, was 51 too many? Well, in some respects, you can say it was a big piece to bite off, but an enjoyable challenge at times. The objective here clearly was to present back to the partner authorities that big overarching view. And if you had 5 different consultants doing it in 5 different ways, you would probably struggle to knit that together into a cohesive deliverable at the end, a cohesive view. So I'm comfortable with the large programs, but I think ideally it flows out of a more established relationship going forward.
One of the vital things that you mentioned was the coordination with the supply network. Do you think, maybe David might answer this, is there any way that our partners can perhaps think separately about costing that or assessing that type of input, because it can have such a significant bearing on the project as you move away into capital funding?
Yeah, it's a good question, Eddie. The approach was using, so the utility suppliers, as Nick said earlier on, it's all about getting in early, trying to get a relationship. They have a massive information that they can share. It's just, it is all about timescale, because they're so swamped with all these applications. They don't give it the time they should really until an application goes in. So once you fill your application in for your infrastructure improvements, that's when you take it as a real job and you'll get more technical input. The hard part is breaking in, though. You're trying to break that door down to talk to them strategically on the overall is tough. Because obviously, as you work through your plans, you look at an area. So you may have 1 or 2 or 3 sites relatively close, which may need substations. So from an REC perspective, their infrastructure and upgrades to get those 4 or 5 substations operational in time frame is a piece of reinforcement work for them potentially, and it's allowing them to have the time to look at it strategically on where they're best placed for the reinforcement. So again, they need to be played into the overall program, and like everything with utilities, it takes a considerable length of time. So that's the first hurdle. The second hurdle is trying to get accurate costs from them, because like everything, it's how long's a piece of string. You may just want a little substation on the edge of a site, but it might have 185 meters of trench work through a street or across a major road, whereas another job may have a substation inside of a site which needs 6 meters off an H3 main. So again, it's understanding scope and getting to speak to these utility providers and see potential what the impact is. I think it's all about trying to get face-to-face meetings if that's possible. So for the gathering, if the biggest thing I found was getting to talk to Scottish Power Manweb as they are, and trying to get some output. So that's the best advice I can probably offer at this point.
Great.
And any costings and so on that you get from the DNO is very much at a point in time as well. That's the other challenge. And 6 to 12 months, it'll only be valid for however many months, Dave. 3 months, is it typically?
Yeah, normally 90 days.
Yeah. So 6 to 12 months later, they've had 4 other applications for other things in the air, and it's taken up the spare capacity on the network. So yeah, very challenging.
One of the things I noticed is that there is the opportunity here to look at types of heat pumps for different buildings, and it was fortunate, I think, that a lot of the same manufacturers could be used. I don't know if Jan wants to come in and say, is there something that would have in this program that would have helped with that in order to quickly assess heat pump availability going out of this, or did you go for particular manufacturers to spread that risk?
It was looking at all the various options. At the moment, our personal opinion is that Mitsubishi do the best high temperature air source heat pump if you're looking at about 50 kilowatts. And so that was a driver. And obviously the older buildings work better on the higher temperature heat pumps, because you don't necessarily have the wall space to increase the radiator sizes. So that was a driving factor on the air source heat pump selection. But yeah, we were spreading it across manufacturers as well to keep our options. Daikin and Mitsubishi look at the production of hot water very differently. And so that affected decisions, like for leisure centres where the hot water production becomes almost a more dominant factor than the heating. That swayed us towards the high temperature heat pumps as well. So there's an awful lot of variables that have to be considered when you're going through, and there's never one rule fits all.
Excellent, excellent. When the final challenge I was wanting to ask about was the data, and Lauren and Rob might be able to provide some sort of idea of how you went about that. But is you built a database and a format for that through a portal? Do you think that is the way forward, and do you think that would surpass the document type heat decarbonisation plans that are coming along?
I think so. I think it. We are a very data. That old adage, which I won't use its explicit term for, but stuff in, stuff out. So it's very important that we get the right data in to be able to produce the visualizations that we know we can at 1.5. Now, behind the scenes, this was one of our first projects, and we were all very much in the weeds with this one. 52 buildings, 187 projects, just under £1 million in savings. From a baseline position of 45 million kilowatt hours and a 20 million kilowatt saving. I think these are all numbers that are still in our heads from this project, but there was quite a challenge to get the data in. So we're looking at solutions behind the scenes to simplify and make that a slightly easier process for both parties. But yeah, very true. It's all about the quality of the data, the accessibility, and also the speed in which we can get the data as well.
Lauren, do you think there's a better way to do that? Is there something
Lauren,
that can improve it?
Maybe the AI option?
Sorry, Matt, signal wasn't good. I heard fragments of that. I don't know if you can hear me now. Can you hear me okay
Yes, we
now?
can. Yep.
Oh, brilliant. No, I don't really have much to add to that, really. I mean, I think Rob discussed the quality of the data is the only thing that really needs to be improved on, I think. But at the moment, we are doing a lot of development in the back end and moving towards, I think Rob just mentioned, potentially using AI to strengthen the areas where we've had those data deficits, really. But I think what we're trying to produce really is an all-encompassing platform that can be used instead of having, a very old age decarbonisation reporting style. What we have right here is something it's quite slick, it's quite quick, and it's what we're hoping would replace that type of reporting that we do at the moment. But yeah, I think Rob, you kind of said it all, really. Don't we have much to add there?
Fair enough.
But I think it's right to say that data manipulation and so on is you've got the hard yards to do early on, haven't you? With assessing the information that comes in from the buildings, doing the surveys, doing that optioneering, doing the design. It's really, and you've got to do that regardless. It's how that data is then captured and flows through, and particularly on a large program, it becomes very unwieldy if you haven't got that. It was quite noticeable on this particular one how quickly Dr. John was able to to turn around some of that data analytics late in the day at program level, because the grunt work had been done up front, generating the information and and getting it correct within the spreadsheets. So
Great, well done to all, and thanks for that. It's a terrific achievement, having gotten through the programme in a short time with the amount of information that you had in front of you. So well done, and thank you for that. I'll maybe wrap up now. We've got a programme going on with help for public sector decarbonisation. So the next webinar is about delivery stage, and beyond PSDS, we're looking at funding options for the public sector thereafter. So a quick push for the hub. If you want to get in touch with us, we'll provide independent information. But I just want to thank everybody for their time today. I hope it's been useful to everyone.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks.